Okay. Good evening, everybody. I know usually we do the weekly roundup, but with Shavuos, and I was in a very Shavuos mindset. First of all, I hope you all had a great Shavuos. I had a very Shavuos mindset. I didn't really prepare the Chumash of the week. So, however, I did prepare this class to some extent for Shavuos. I was like a pinch hitter. We had an all-night learning session. And in case somebody didn't show up, I was going to teach a class. But that person did show up, and therefore I didn't give it, and nor did I really look it over so many times. But it's very short. It looks great. It's kind of interesting. And if you like it, we'll do more of these classes in the future. So it's my style just to jump right in. My father always talks about the best concerts he ever went to were the ones where the artists don't give any introductions. They just start playing. So I try to emulate that, but I don't do it. Okay, we're going to talk about physician-assisted suicide. Can you do it? Can you not do it? Why can you do it? Or why can you not do it? Not you, a doctor. I sent out a picture of Dr. Kevorkian, the death doctor, very famous. We're not going to talk about him, but interestingly enough, he is from here in Michigan, where I am, in the same county, if not even the same city, West Bloomfield. And he's very famous for providing, he assisted with hundreds, I don't know, at least I think almost 200 physician-assisted deaths. He went to jail for only about 7 years. It's a bit controversial. Maybe he was doing them a goodness and doing something good and kind, or some say he was doing something terrible. But let's see what the Torah has to say. So you might not know who these two people are. I didn't know who they were up until I never saw their face up until right now. These two women are sisters. And there was a story 2 months ago that they disappeared. Nobody knew where they were. And they said, we're going to Europe. They were from Arizona. She's a doctor and she's a nurse, Susan and Lori, I believe. And they went on a trip and they did not return home. And the family, or at least the friends, investigated where did they go. Turns out they went to a physician-assisted suicide place in Basel, Switzerland, where it is legal to have physician-assisted suicide. Now, they were not terminally ill. They were both sick. They were both fairly sick, and they felt that they were going to pass away at some time, and they wanted to pass away together as sisters. Interesting. No, I'm not going to get into the psychology behind it because I don't know. But that's what ended up happening. Now, it's some places in the world, it's perfectly okay. Usually, European countries are the first to jump on such things to have a physician-assisted suicide. Now, in the United States, however, it was deemed in 1996. It was deemed federally legal for physician-assisted suicide. But that was later overturned unanimously by the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe in 1996, actually. They overturned it in 1996. I think they overturned it in 1996, that you were not allowed to do physician-assisted suicide. The reason why it was legal is because the courts didn't see the difference between someone pulling the plug, and physician-assisted suicide. Somebody, especially who was terminally ill, what's the difference? Okay, so now they had more control of when it can end. But then the United States Supreme Court stepped in and said, no, federally it is not allowed. However, not federally, we stay out of it. It's up to the states. And there are currently 8 states that do allow physician-assisted suicide for a terminally ill patient. A person has to be terminally ill, I believe, with 6 months to go. The question is that okay? Is that legal in Jewish law? 1 second. I made my screen too big, so I can't actually open up some sources over here. Apologize. Here we go. So let us look into the first place. It started talking about suicide and the value of life and do not murder. Yeah, these are 7 laws. These are not just Jewish laws. These are universal laws. Sefaria does not have a good translation, and I'll tell you why. So I go to Chabad.org. So this is Parshas Noach. Noah is already out of the ark, and he starts getting mitzvahs, commandments from God. Noah was not Jewish himself. These are universal. This is for all mankind. We're all cousins. At one point, we all come from Noah. So one of the things that God says is as follows. But by the blood of your souls, it's much better in the Hebrew. V'ach es dimchem l'nafshay seichem. When it comes to your blood, the blood of your soul, edrush miyad chalchaya, drashenu miyad ha'adam miyad ish achiv. Yeah, from the animal, I will demand the animal's life. From the hand of man, I will demand the life from the hand of man. From the hand of his brother, I will demand his life. I will demand the soul of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man through man, shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Okay, in other words, we're talking about over here, you can't murder. Now, you can't murder. If an animal kills somebody, God forbid, we kill the animal. If it's from another person, we kill him. His brother, we'll talk about what that means. I'll demand the soul of man, and you should not kill somebody because he's made in the image of God. Now, as my teacher once said, the Torah does not have unnecessary words. It's not Charles Dickens. It doesn't get paid by the word. I always love that line. So a careful reading of the text, it seems to be kind of repetitive. But it's not repetitive, and they're each coming to teach you something else. So the Rambam, we're going to understand how the Rambam understands this passage. So he says like this: by the blood of your souls, I will demand an account from every beast. In other words, animal kills, kill the animal. But by the blood of your souls, it says by the blood of your souls, which means the Rambam understands to mean your soul, nafshay seichem, means suicide. Meaning if you decide, God forbid, to take your own soul, you're not allowed to do that. That's called suicide. Not allowed to do that. And from a beast, that's a problem. From the hand of man, that means murder by somebody else. So it can't be murdered by somebody else. His brother. Now, why did they add his brother? So says the Rambam, his brother means in a brotherly way. That if someone tries to kill another person, but in a humane way, a brotherly way, the person asked another man to kill him, which we'll give an episode in the Torah about, you are not allowed to do it. No, both parties are not allowed to do such a thing. But why? Why can a person take their own life? Why can't you take a life? Why can't a person take a life of another? Because he's made in the image of God. What does that mean? Made in the image of God. So says the Torah, says the Rambam, like this. The reason for not taking another person's life is not because you're depriving them of the joys of life or anything they can get from life. No, the problem is you're destroying something, a sanctified item, something that is sanctified, made in the image of God. It's a sanctified creation. It's as if it's an affront to God himself. And that's the reason why we don't do it. We're going to look at an episode in the Torah. Maybe there is a situation where it is okay. So here we go. Now, how far does that extend? Not taking somebody else's life. Our focus is not on suicide, and our focus it's very narrow. And we're talking about somebody taking the brotherly love, the brotherly death. So how far does that go? So it says here in Tractate Samachos. Tractate Samachos says like this. Da 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 da. Here we go. We may not close the eyes of a dying man. So here we have a person on the throes of death, on their deathbed. 1 second. Yeah, so talking about how do we treat somebody on the deathbed? So it says, we may not close the eyes of a dying man. Ooh, I'm so sorry. Whoever touches and moves him is a murderer. Rabbi Meir used to say, he can be compared to a lamp which is dripping. Should a man touch it, he extinguishes it. Similarly, whoever closes the eyes of a dying man is considered to have taken his life. So it says Rabbi Meir, we're not even allowed to perhaps speed up the process in any way. We can't. It's like considered as if a flickering flame, essentially. That if you touch them there and you lose any moment of their life, you assist in any like loss of their life. That is tantamount to murder. Second. So here we go. Physician-assisted suicide is clearly an issue. But here we go. We have a passage in the Torah that seems to imply the opposite. If I can get this out of the way, you guys probably don't even see this. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. We have in Shaul, in Samuel, the end of King Saul's life. He's fighting the Plishtim. I don't know how to say it in English. Palestinians, maybe? I think Plishtim, whatever. Now, King Saul had a bit of a tortured life. He was their first king. He really was a good king. He was an excellent king, but he went insane. And he even tried to kill his son-in-law. Who was his son-in-law? King David. Tried to kill King David. He suspected him of taking over the throne, which he suspected correctly, but it wasn't because King David wanted the throne. It was because he was anointed as a king to take over the throne. But King David had no intentions of overthrowing the government, usurping the position. And King Saul was very paranoid, and he sought to kill him many, many times. But God kept it. So the question is, why did God keep King Saul alive? Shaul HaMelech, because he was really it wasn't his fault. He went insane. God made it so that he was insane. Why did God do it that way? I'm not exactly, doesn't seem to be elaborated upon. But nevertheless, he was a good king, and he really tried to protect his people. His son kind of sold him out. No, not really. His son Yonasan, was very close to King David. Make sure to tell King David, well, he wasn't king then. Make sure to tell David where his father was so that he could stay away and everything will be fine. So now here we are at the end of his life, and he's fighting. What's going on? He's fighting the Plishtim. It was a war that just would never end. And his son was killed. Yonasan was killed. Avinadav was killed. He had another son that was killed. And he was being surrounded. The battle raged around Saul. And some of the archers hit him. And he was severely wounded by the archers. Saul said to his arms bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, so that the uncircumcised," in other words, the Plishtim, "may not run me and make sport of me." But his arms bearer in his great awe refused. He didn't want to do it. Whereupon Saul grasped the sword and fell upon it. With his arms bearer saw that Saul was dead, so he too fell on his sword and died with him. So seemingly we have a situation over here where King Saul, who was a God-fearing man, perfect in Torah and mitzvahs, he really was. He was a tzaddik. He was the real deal. Seemed to have killed himself. And not only that, he had asked his arms bearer to kill him. So my high, as they say in the Gemara. What's going on over here? Nowhere in the Torah will you find an explanation that said King Saul was trying to take his own life because he wanted to end his life early. In other words, he was doing it because he wanted to commit suicide. It wasn't an act of, I'm going to die anyway, so let me just speed up the process. There is no commentator that gives that comment. What do they say? So the most common explanations are like this. King Saul knew that he was going to die. He was surrounded by the Plishtim. What he felt was he felt that if the Plishtim killed him, God forbid, even though there was a total loss there was no way the Jews were going to win that war. They later did with King David, but not then and there. The Jewish people would want to do like a second round. In other words, they were on their way to retreat. They were retreating, and then they saw that their king was dead, and they would take revenge upon the Plishtim. But for sure, they were going to die. Everybody agrees that if the Jews tried to mount a second attack, they all would have been killed. Tens of thousands of Jews. So King Saul did it as an act of, it's a way of saving life. In other words, there is a concept that we sacrifice the one for the many. That is it's a little bit off topic, but we had recently in the Rambam that there is a situation where it's kind of sick. I'm not sure if it ever happened, where if an army comes to invade and they say, we just want one person, send him out and we will spare everybody else, we send that person out. I don't know if that ever happened. When I spoke about it with Rabbi Schneer, he didn't seem to, he was very aware of it, and he wants to do a class on it, actually, Thursday night in a Talmud class. It's from a Talmud. He says it's not so simple, but yes, that is true. That was recently in the Rambam. So that was one explanation. King Saul knew he was trying to sacrifice his own life for the many. And another explanation is he knew that the Plishtim would not have, first, they definitely would have tortured him, but that's not enough. They would have made him serve idols, and they would have raped him, the commentators say. And so for those things, we give up our life in order not to have happen. So that is a quick explanation of what will happen over there. Let me just take a look over here. Okay. So in summation, this is a very quick class. There is no concept. You're not allowed to ever do physician-assisted suicide. Bottom line, we have clear from the Rambam, the pasuk, the Torah says you can't be killed by your brother. It says by a man, which means murder, or by your brother, means not murder, but just euthanasia, which is literally, I think, what's it called? Brotherly death or kind death. Is that what euthanasia means? That is against the Torah. And we are not even allowed to speed up the process in any way of a person ending their life. We can't touch them. We cannot move them. Now, there is a difference between withholding care. Sometimes there are situations where withholding care of somebody is warranted and is okay, but you must consult a Rav. God forbid you get in such a situation that you need to ask a rabbi. It's very rare, and it's very narrow, but ours has to do with physician-assisted suicide. You're not allowed to do it. Smacha, we see from the Gemara, you're not allowed to do it. King Saul seemingly asked his person to kill him, and he ended up killing himself, but nowhere in the Gemara, nowhere in the commentators does it say that he tried to do it because he wanted to commit suicide or he wanted to end his life early. That wasn't what it was about. It wasn't trying to end his life early. It had to do with saving more lives, ultimately, or protecting God's name. Now, I want to make a statement over here. The spirit of the law is as follows. What people nowadays, in secular law, when they talk about physician-assisted suicide, it's more of like, it's coming from the perspective of, what's the danger? The danger is if we allow somebody who's terminally ill, maybe we'll start saying, even if they're not terminally ill, but they just feel depressed, to the old and the feeble, somebody who's old, they're like, oh, it'll just be easier for my family or on us if we, let that person kill themselves early, sort of like what the Greeks did, right? And they would slit their wrists in a hot bath. So and they say the reason is they have nothing less. There's nothing in life life can't provide them with anything. That's the idea. Life can't provide them with anything. They're not getting anything out of life anymore. And therefore, let them ease their pain. But says the Torah, that's not the reason why. It's not about what life has to give to us. It's because we're made in the image of God. There's a famous mashal given by Rashi, a famous parable, which says that imagine one day there was a king and he had all these statues, all these busts, all these statues of him all over the city, and somebody comes and knocks down the statues and defaces them. Are we concerned? Do we put him to death because he destroyed public property? So says the Torah, that's not why we put him. That's not why a king would. The Torah, the Gemara, the parable, the Rashi explains they don't put him to death because he defaced something. Yeah, he destroyed property. That's not why. It's because it's an affront to the king. It's an affront to the king himself. He's damaging the king, not these like copper or gold or whatever. It's made in the image of the person. A human being is made in the image of God. By destroying the life, our bodies don't belong to us. They belong to God. God crafted us. God formed us. And by destroying another body, you're destroying God, so to speak. You're destroying his work. You're destroying him. It's an affront to him. That's the perspective of Torah, that it's not about what I'm getting out of life. It's about it's about what the person is giving. Let me give you an example. There's a very well-known story that one day a woman walks into a flower shop and she sees an old man bringing a bunch of flowers and some gifts. And she asks him, "Oh, who are those for?" And the man says, "My wife." She goes, "Oh, is it her birthday, or is it an anniversary?" And he says, "Nope, I bring it every day." And she says, "Wow, she must fall in love with you every day, all over again." It's a true story. And the man says, it happened with a Chabad rabbi. And the man said, "No, she actually has no idea who I am. She has Alzheimer's. She completely forgot of who I am." And and I bring it to her every day, these different things. And she gets excited, but I have to introduce myself. And she says, "Well, why do you do it? I mean, it's very nice that, you make someone happy." And he says, "She might not know who I am, but I know who she is. Not only who she was, for sure but who she is even now, everything that she's accomplished, everything she still continues to do by her mere presence. When I look at her, all of the emotions and all of the motivation that I have, that she has, created within me, all the goodness and everything, she's brought out all of these hidden talents from within me. Every time I see her, it brings those out." So says the Torah, you have no idea what life a person's able to do, just the mere presence. Yeah. Perhaps they motivate someone to give tzedakah. They motivate someone to say a prayer. They motivate someone to say, to help another person. Or they look at it, just the mere image of the person laying there or being there can bring out hidden talents that we can't imagine. Those are all reasons that we give, but the bottom line is they're made in the image of God. There's a very famous story. I'll end with this. I'll conclude with this, that the Alter Rebbe tells. It's a story about the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe. A man who was very wealthy ran out of, he gave a lot of tzedakah, and he was very involved in acts of charity and helped a lot of people. And his business took a turn for the worse, and he went very depressed to his Rebbe, to the Alter Rebbe, and says, "What has God, I need all this. What has God done to me? I need all of this money. I need my life back. I need this, everything that I had I need everything I have." So the Alter Rebbe says, "You're asking what you need. But the question is, what are you needed for? The same God who gave you all of this cash and this wealth to give, now we need you for something else. That was one part of your life. Now here's another part of your life. It's chapter 2. And with that, the man sat down, very famous. The man sat down and he started learning. It changed within him something that he had never felt before. And he started to study, and he started to teach, and he had a tremendous effect upon people, even more so than when he was giving money and he had this certain image, this way of life before. So you have to understand the sanctity of life, who we are intrinsically, not just ourselves, but everybody. And we're not down with physician-assisted suicide. It's a quick class. I just thought it was very interesting. I thought I would share. Anybody have any questions? I'm no expert in this. This is just something I studied from. This is from JLI, my old company, my old organization. And they wrote it. It's very nice. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, Rabbi. One question.
Yeah.
This king with these busts or statues of himself, who's to say these weren't idols that were destroyed?
No, right. Rashi doesn't want you to get stuck. Of course, there's many questions you can ask. But the point is that Rashi's trying to bring out is just somebody who's part of the king, not a Jewish king, probably. I don't know, whatever. Maybe it wasn't the best city. The point is,
even better that they're idols.
Right. But his point is, when you destroy something that in such a situation, something that is the image of the king, and they destroy these images, are we arresting him because it's public property and it costs money and he's got to pay it back? No, we arrest him because he's doing it to hurt the king. He's not doing it to just destroy property. He's doing it to hurt the king.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And this point, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
The same thing with a human. It's when you damage another human, it's damaging God. This is a godly image. It's an affront to God himself, not to the person. Anybody have any questions? Any more questions? If not, yeah.
So the word you were looking for was the Philistines in English?
Is that what it is? Philistines? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Right?
Yeah, Philistines, yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what happens to the souls of the people that do commit the thing?
Commit suicide? Who? I don't know what happens to the assistants, but nowadays, so it used to be that, we're talking about a little bit about suicide. I don't want to go too much into that, but back in the day, it says that people who committed suicide, God forbid, were buried in a different part of the cemetery. It was you don't sit Shiva for the person. Don't say Kaddish, because it was such an affront to God that it's sort of like maybe like a rectification. It's in a form of atonement that we don't really assist the soul. But nowadays, most, if not all, Rabbanim, rabbis, leading authorities, and I think in the past 100 years, the idea of mental health is much more accepted. It's much more accepted nowadays. That a person did it because they were sick. In other words, they died because they were sick. There was some sort of sickness. They couldn't. Depression is seen as a sickness in Judaism that can be cured and can be curbed and worked on. That's really what the Tanya is trying to starting point. So nowadays we don't do such things. If a person, God forbid, commits suicide, hopefully we don't know. Lo yaleinu, as we say, shouldn't know of such things. They're treated as if someone that was killed, that they died of a sickness, and we do all the proper. Their soul goes up like everything else, normal 12 months, 11 months. It goes back to its source.
So what happens to murderers?
So we actually spoke about it in a Talmud class. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this, but the atonement, if they're back in the day, they would be put to death one way or another, and that was in a form of atonement. That was their atonement, like that would atone for their souls. What happens to murderers nowadays? Now that we don't put them to death, God has his ways. It's bidei shemayim, as we say. It's in the hands of heaven. So however God decides to rectify, God is not trying to punish. God doesn't punish. He atones. He clears up. He fills back up. He makes it whole once again. So however God feels that he needs to do it, that's how he does it. You got to talk. Maybe you have to look at the Kabbalists. Talk to the Kabbalists a little bit, but I don't know the answer to that. Anybody have any questions? Any other questions? Okay, that story, by the way, of these two ladies was only 2 months ago. So just kind of reignited the talk of physician-assisted suicide. So it's a real thing. It's something really on the plate, but we should encourage people to know who they really are. That's really made in the image of God. Don't come down like fire and brimstone. Repent or whatever. That's not a Jewish approach. It's with love and encouragement, and really by living as an example. That's the best way to impress somebody. Living joyfully, and with a lot of conviction, and that has a tremendous effect upon other people. Best way to affect somebody else. Okay, next week we will continue, God willing, with the weekly roundup. I'll be back to regularly scheduled programming. Tomorrow, hopefully, Rabbi Schneer's wife had a baby girl. So we'll see if he'll give a class tomorrow. She had it on Shavuos. So we'll see if she actually if he'll give a class tomorrow. If not, we'll figure something out. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. Sei gesund.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No problem.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah. See you guys.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah, sure. See you there.
Shalom, shalom, Rabbi.
Oh, Moshe. Good to see you, man. Bye, Lynn.
Likewise.
All right, Dan. Da 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 da.